Now, without further delay, let's begin today's event, again sponsored by Mitek and hosted by American Banker. I'd like to introduce your moderator for today, and that is Mike Sisk. Mike, you have the floor.
Thanks very much, Marvin, and I would like to welcome the audience once again. We are very grateful that you have chosen to share some of your day with us. We know that your time is valuable, and for the next 60 minutes or so, we will make every effort to make every minute count. Once again, our topic today is secure and delightful digital onboarding, the role of ID document authentication. And my name is Michael Sisk. I will be your moderator today. I've been a New York-based journalist for about 20 years, and I've had stints as editor-at-large at U.S. Banker and contributing editor at Bank Technology News. And my articles, besides American Banker, of course, have appeared in Barron's, Crane's New York Business, Inc., Institutional Investor, Strategy and Business, and Worth. And I am very, very pleased to introduce our two excellent speakers today. The first is Steve Craig, Director, Products and Experience at Mitek. Steve directs products and user experience strategy for Mitek's global identity business. With over a decade of experience in fintech, Steve previously worked on software as a service and mobile solutions for Digital Insight, Intuit, and Hewlett-Packard. Steve resides in San Diego and holds an MBA from the Rady School of Management at UCSD. And we are very pleased to have him with us today, as well as Julie Conroy, Research Director for Retail Banking at Aite Group. Julie is Research Director and covers fraud, data security, and anti-money laundering and compliance issues. She brings to Aite Group more than a decade of hands-on product management experience, working with financial institutions, payments processors, and risk management companies. She holds an MA in International Policy from the Monterey Institute of International Studies and a BA in Business Administration from the Michigan State University Honors College. And we're also very pleased to have Julie with us today. And just before we jump into the real meat of the discussion here, I wanted to reiterate one thing that Marvin mentioned at the top, and that is that we do have time at the end for Q&A. Usually we've got about 10 or 15 minutes set aside for that. And you do not have to wait until the end to put your question in the queue. You can do that throughout the hour as the Spirit moves you. So please, get that question in the queue, and we'll make every effort to get to it that we can. If we run out of time, which sometimes happens when there's lots of great content or lots of great questions or both, we will follow up with you afterward. So rest assured, we will answer your question either in the time we have today or shortly thereafter. Please ask away. We very much would like to hear from you. And I think that kind of brings me to the end of my little opening spiel here. I would like to officially turn things over to Julie, who is going to run us through the agenda and get us really kicked off here. So Julie, let me hand it to you, and please take it away.
Great. Thanks a lot, Mike, and thanks for everybody's time today. I'm going to start by setting the stage based on some of the research that we've done here at Aite Group about the trends that are driving both the business landscape in financial services as well as the risk environment. And so we're seeing this increasing focus on the digital channels by FIs and by criminals as well. We're also seeing just this increasing importance and competitiveness associated with the customer experience. So I'll spend a little bit of time talking about that. And then I will turn it over to Steve to talk about how document authentication can help with these dual goals of making the experience both more delightful, more seamless, as well as more secure. A very wise man once said that you never get a second chance to make a first impression. And that is more true today in these digital channel environments than at any time before, because we have a group of consumers that have lots of choices at their fingertips, literally. And if you make an experience too cumbersome, too difficult for the consumer, they're going to go somewhere else. And so as we look at today's banking and payments customers, being hyper-connected is the new normal. And we see an increasing proportion of transactions and an increasing proportion of onboarding taking place via the digital channels. Banks and payments firms are competing based on differentiated and personalized customer experiences. We have this breed of consumer whose expectations for what a good digital customer experience should be, those expectations have been set by brands like Apple and Amazon, who do a great job of making things very elegant, very easy. And so the expectations for those types of digital experiences carry over into the banking and payments and financial services environments. We're seeing more and more use of alternative data to inform both the risk decisions as well as the marketing decisions for financial institutions. And as we look at all of these expectations that consumers have for what a great customer experience should be, those expectations carry over into the business banking environment as well, because at the end of every business banking transaction is a person who at the end of the day is a consumer. And so we see these pressures for great customer experience not only on the retail side of the bank, but also on the wholesale side. Now, as we look at today's banking criminal, being hyper-connected is the norm for them as well. We're seeing as more and more transaction volume and value takes place in those digital channels, the criminals are absolutely focused on those channels as well. These are organized crime rings that purposely spread themselves across international boundaries. They are nimble, they are well-funded, filled with a lot of really smart people. And these guys are seeing the gaps many times before financial institutions can close the gaps. They're also benefiting from just a crazy amount of breached data. I love this graphic because it does just a great job of encapsulating the extent to which there is more data in the hands of criminals today than at any time before. And you just look at all of these database breaches that have happened over the last couple of years. And it's the 1.5 billion records that were compromised at Yahoo, including username and password. It's the 80 million records at the Anthem breach, where we just saw the largest settlement thus far in data breach history come out today, where Anthem's paying a $115 million fine on the back end of their breach because there's been so much damage as a result of it. So as I talk to executives at financial institutions and payment companies, anymore as you see a consumer presenting their personally identifiable information or a set of credentials, you have to assume that at some point that data has been breached. And so you need to take extra steps to verify that this really is the bona fide consumer at the other end of the transaction and not a criminal using stolen data. These crime rings are in it for the long game. And that there was an anecdote from a banker I spoke with a few months ago that really encapsulates that. There was a breach at a medical school in this bank's footprint. And it was one of those rare cases where they actually caught the bad guys. They got a prosecution. And over the course of the prosecution, it came out that this crime ring was not planning to do anything with the data right away. They were planning to sit on it for about 10 years because a bunch of med students today, they don't have much credit and they don't have much money. But 10 years from now, those med students would be doctors. And so that data would be worth a lot more on the dark web. So this just kind of shows us that we're up against a really challenging foe here. And at the same time we see all of this data that is at criminals' disposal, we have the U.S. as the largest card market on the planet in the process of migrating to the EMV standard. And right now we're about halfway there. We're at about 50% chip-on-chip transactions in the U.S. And one of the benefits of being the last G20 country to move to EMV is that there's lots of other countries that have done this before us, and so lots of lessons that we can learn. And what we've seen in many countries, Canada is one example. I could show a very similar graph for Australia or the UK. As the counterfeit losses get pulled out of the market over the course of going to EMV, we see a fraud migration and fraud shifts. And what we see in the Canadian case is that over the course of the ensuing 4 years after they migrated to EMV, we saw a rough tripling of identity fraud in that market. Now, Canada actually has some pretty rigorous KYC processes, and the digital channel account opening process is much more difficult in Canada. So that actually means in the U.S. market, we're probably quite a bit more exposed as we're seeing the migration from EMV and the resulting fraud migrations. We also see that the criminals migrate to account takeover. So the UK saw a very sharp rise in account takeover attacks in a post-EMV environment. And so as we look at the U.S. market, we expect to see both account takeover and application fraud rise. I did a couple pieces of research last year in which I surveyed and interviewed fraud executives at a number of U.S. financial institutions. In the case of the application fraud research, we surveyed 83 financial institution executives. The sizes were roughly balanced for the kind of the size breakdown in the U.S. market. And what we found was that the bad guys really weren't waiting for the fraud migration. At the point when I did that research, we were only at about 20% chip-on-chip for credit and 10% chip-on-chip for debit. So it was very early in the EMV migration. But even at that point last year, the financial institutions were seeing sharply rising application fraud. And so it's really, right now it's being fueled by all of that data that's at the criminal's disposal, which unfortunately means it's probably going to get worse before it gets better as we see more and more counterfeit fraud get pulled out. Right now, at the end of 2016, we had about $4.5 billion worth of counterfeit fraud in the U.S. ecosystem. As the opportunity to perpetrate that fraud gets pulled out by EMV, we're not going to see these organized crime rings give it up and go get a day job. We're going to start to see that fraud migration. So that's something that has a lot of fraud executives that I speak with pretty concerned. At the point I did the research last year, I had a bunch of fraud execs tell me that they were already seeing 100% year-over-year increases in application fraud. It's manifesting in a couple of different ways. We're still seeing that identity theft is the primary attack vector, and so leveraging the data in breaches like the Anthem breach and using that to open up accounts in consumers' names. We're also seeing sharply rising synthetic fraud. And as I get inquiries from my clients about fraud trends, I would say that I have had more inquiries over the past 9 months or so about synthetic fraud and how to combat it than my entire 6 years at Aite Group. It's just something that I think banks are getting better at recognizing the problem and realizing the scope and the magnitude of the problem. We're also seeing that criminals are leveraging the data breaches and piecing together bits and pieces of identities to create synthetic identities. The other factor that's really driving the synthetic fraud is the Social Security number randomization that started in the U.S. market in 2011 and basically just made it a whole lot easier for criminals to fabricate synthetic identities. So all of that kind of coming together in this perfect storm that is driving increases in application fraud. And at the same time, we see this increasing threat environment. We also see that FIs are seeking to increase the proportion of accounts that are originated via digital channels. And we see this both on the demand deposit account side of the institution as well as with credit card originations. We're seeing credit card move to digital channel originations a bit more quickly than what we see on the DDA side of the bank, and that's really because you don't have the funding requirement there, so it's a lot easier to have a seamless end-to-end digital channel origination process. But as we have more and more of our accounts that are originated in these digital channels, these are also higher risk accounts because, and this was a very consistent stat that came out of the research last year, we see that application fraud rates in the online channel are 8 times that of the branch, which makes sense. As you have all of this compromised data at your disposal, you can perform much more automated types of attacks with it in the digital channels. It's also much lower risk than fabricating a fake ID and taking it in person into a branch to try to open up an account. So as we look at this increasing threat environment, this increasing move to bring originations and transactions into digital, we also see that the customer experience is a key consideration as banks are looking at how they can deploy compensating controls. So one of the questions that we asked in last year's research was, how important are a variety of different factors in your business case as you're considering investments in new account risk assessment tools? As you can see by this graphic, 95% of the folks that we interviewed said that improving the customer onboarding experience was one of the most important drivers of their business case. Detecting fraud was also high up there, but at 84%, it was a full 11 percentage points behind that customer experience piece. And that's very consistent with the conversations that I have with a lot of financial institution fraud executives. They very much feel like they're wearing two hats. And one is that traditional loss prevention hat, where your job is to catch the bad guys and keep the money from going out the door. But the other is making sure that as you're deploying controls that can help do this, that you're not inserting too much friction into the customer experience. And optimally, that as you bring technologies to bear that can help with this, that these technologies can, in some cases, even make the customer experience better. Because again, as banks are competing with each other, they're also competing with brands like Apple and Amazon for the expectations that they have set for what is a great customer experience. Now, one of the ways that banks are looking at doing this is capitalizing on this changing notion of identity. It used to be, prior to the internet age, that as a bank or a payments company was determining, do I want to do business with a consumer, that was informed by the face-to-face interactions that you have with that consumer, either across the desk or by being part of the same community. And your determination of whether this person is who they say they are or whether they have the ability to pay back a loan was informed by those interactions that you had with those people. Enter the internet, and it shifted to being about the PII. So, is that person presenting the right name, social security number, date of birth? Well, as we saw in the bubble graphic, the bad guys have all that data at this point. So now it's really looking at the broader concept of an identity and looking at all of these other elements that are available to us to determine, is this person who they say they are? Things like the devices that we use to interact and the reputation associated with those, or the credential that we're presenting, an analysis of that credential to determine, is this a real driver's license? And does this information match what the databases say that it should for this consumer's identity? At the same time we have the digital identity, we're also seeing this trend towards digital transformation that is introducing new forms of risks that financial institutions have to manage. And we've got the Internet of Things that creates a lot of opportunity and a lot of utility for consumers, but also creates new opportunities for criminals to capitalize on that. And we've already seen a handful of exploits that leverage the Internet of Things, with everything from using connected devices for DDoS attacks to some of the usually friendly fraud that comes through Alexa and some of the other devices. We're seeing open APIs, which again creates new opportunity, also creates new opportunity for risks that banks have to manage, and then faster payments, which as money moves faster, as decisions have to flow faster, we need better controls around who can access the financial system. Because as you look at the pace with which the cybercrime is proceeding, time really is money. And banks need to have the ability to vet consumers, risk assess consumers, detect new fraud patterns in a very rapid, with a very rapid pace. As we look at the opportunities for these crime rings, there's a lot of low-hanging fruit out there for them. And what we see is that without the ability to evolve our own defensive tactics every bit as rapidly as the fraud is moving, every second that we delay, that's more money that goes into the coffers of the criminals. This is a great graphic that really demonstrates the opportunity as well as the risk here. So as criminals at the first part of this chart find the gap in the system and they develop their exploits, they have some trial and error, they have some refinement, and then once they figure out an attack vector that works, they just replicate the heck out of it. And they go over and over and maximize the amount of money that they can extract with that particular attack vector. Once the financial institution realizes the exploit, they then start to adapt their controls to seal the gaps. The quicker that you can realize the exploit and seal the gap, the less money that's going to go out the door. Because at a certain point, it becomes unprofitable for the criminal to continue to proceed with this particular attack vector. They're going to move on. They're going to find something else. So that's where the concept of bringing in technology, bringing in analytics comes in to help change the first impression that a customer gets as they're trying to open up a new account from this to something like this, where they feel like they're being welcomed into the institution and provided a great experience. And the risk vetting has been such that they're not getting a new account with a bunch of asterisks associated with it. Yes, we're delighted to have you as a customer, but you can't do X, Y, and Z for the first 90 days until we figure out whether you are who you say you are. And so that's where, as I talk to institutions, I'm seeing a lot of engagement in technologies that can leverage elements of the digital identity, that can leverage technologies like machine learning. And machine learning is a big buzzword out there right now. As I walked across the floor at Money 2020 and some other conferences over the past year, you see it everywhere. But this is one buzzword that has a lot of substance behind it. So I did a deep dive into the technology in the first part of this year and found lots of really interesting use cases where financial institutions were deploying technologies, leveraging machine learning, and finding that kind of win-win scenario of improving detection capabilities while also reducing false positives and overall providing a better customer experience. Because machine learning is all about finding the deviations from good user behavior rather than relying on a whole bunch of rule sets that are looking for patterns indicative of fraud, which just by the very nature of that, you start to have rules upon rules upon rules over time, which inevitably leads to a lot of false positives. And one of the reasons why we're seeing so much buzz about machine learning right now is that it's nothing new, but right now we have this great confluence of a huge pool of available data. We no longer have to really worry about the storage cost of that data as we did before because it's now so cheap thanks to the combination of improvements in technology, the addition of the cloud. We've gone down from a price of $40,000 per gigabyte back in 1980 down to 2 cents to store a gigabyte today. And we also have just this growing population of data scientists, ready access to modeling tools. Google provides them for free now. And so it's really leading to a confluence of events where we can combine this huge availability of data, not just the traditional PII data, but all of these other elements of digital data that can inform better decisions. And so as we look at the opportunity to combine machine learning with more advanced technologies, with this movement to digital channels, one of the key trends that I'm seeing emerging is that fraud prevention and good fraud prevention is actually becoming a competitive issue. So in my past, when I was managing a product management team at a fraud prevention vendor, we always used to say fraud is not a competitive issue because we're all in this together and we're all up against a common enemy. And I still think that's the case. There's lots of opportunities where collaboration can help us better fight fraud, better provide customer experiences. But I'm also seeing that banks and payment companies that are early adopters of some of these new technologies are able to provide better customer experiences. And so that in and of itself becomes a competitive advantage if you're able to do that, as well as stop more fraud and enable more capabilities in the digital environment that so many people are moving towards. So with that, I'm going to turn it over to Steve, who's going to explain some of the ways in which Mitek can help with this.
Thank you, Julie, and thank you, Mike, for introducing us both earlier. I think Julie's done a great job of teeing up the environment that we're all dealing with the changes and the increases in fraud. So I'm responsible for our identity products at Mitek. For Mitek, think about us as your partner in saying yes to more good customers. So through all of the attempts by fraudsters to manipulate the systems that are in place, Mitek wants to get through all that noise and find the good customers so that you can focus on making their experience great. So what I have for you today is just a few slides about Mitek. I'm going to talk about our mobile verification product, Mobile Verify. We've got some pre-recorded demos, and then we'll get right into the question and answer session. Mitek is a global leader in mobile capture and identity verification. We're a publicly traded company. You can find us on the NASDAQ. Our headquarters are here in San Diego. I'm live from San Diego now, but we do have European offices in London and in Amsterdam. If you've ever done a mobile deposit with your smartphone, you've likely used Mitek technology. We're the inventors and pioneers of that technology. The majority of U.S. financial institutions use our mobile deposit product to provide that great experience of skipping the trip down to the ATM or the branch. We've surpassed 1 billion transactions in that particular business line. And we've used that experience in building out the mobile deposit business to propel our identity verification solutions. Today, we're at about 5,600 companies using various components of our technology. And our front-end capture products, which you'll see through a demo, impact about 80 million end-user consumers. In the last few years, Mitek has really grown its document expertise related to identity documents such as driver's licenses, passports, the ID documents of choice for various countries. So we've built a strong foundation there that allows us to serve not just the U.S. market, but the global market. One thing that's really different about Mitek is we approach all of our customer relationships as a partner. So we want to make sure that our customers are meeting their business goals and they're also providing great experiences for their end users, because it's those end users using that technology that keep coming back for more that help us all be successful. One way to think about Mitek and identity verification is our advantage. We've built out a platform that leverages a continuous learning loop. Julie touched a bit on machine learning techniques that are being used throughout the industry. That's core to our identity verification business. So you'll see a triangle here. There's a few pillars to that triangle. First, the data flow. So we have a cloud platform that at scale receives millions of identity documents. This flow of data allows us to spot trends and changes in the identity document ecosystem. Just in the United States alone, with 50 states, states are constantly updating the templates, the layouts, the way that the documents look, the security features, and that's quite a bit of churn. So imagine that at a global scale. You need to be able to see those in real time to be able to support that ecosystem. Now, we also have a team of identity document experts. This is critical. These identity document experts allow us to identify new forgery techniques against IDs so that we can maintain our edge against fraudsters who are always trying to find new techniques. And then we use that data flow and our document experts to program our machine learning algorithms that do a number of things for our business, from identifying documents through classification as well as pinpointing potential tamper or changes to those documents. All of those combined help us to be the most accurate, to have the fastest performance, to have the broadest coverage, and to ultimately offer the best user experience. Now, this set of capabilities leads us right into our product, Mobile Verify. And Mobile Verify is instant ID document authentication. So think about this as your just as a teller line or your customer-facing person would be looking at a document physically. We brought that technology into the smartphone. So through this, we're helping organizations offer safe and secure onboarding in the digital channel. So the great user experience has to do with our history and understanding how to evaluate a document using the smartphone of the camera. Our platform allows us to achieve fast and accurate results. Our expertise of coverage and data flow allows us to offer global document coverage. And in many cases, we deploy this technology in combination with other techniques to help customers achieve compliance with respect to know your customer requirements or anti-money laundering requirements. Additionally, we've also integrated a technology that allows our native mobile SDK to scan for the presence of invisible security features. You'll see that in the demo on how we're able to detect and decode and evaluate those security features to know if the document was indeed authentic. And then for our customers that need that extra human interaction, we support an expert review process for our Mobile Verify product. In Mobile Verify, the best way to think about it is the intersection of user experience and compliance. So the capabilities that we've built into the product enable secure identity verification, while at the same time making it quite easy for the end user to get through that process. So the net result of that is decreasing abandonment. The alternatives to many of the identity verification methods today include going to a branch, sending in documents, maybe even requiring a fax of those documents. So by making that technology available to the end users, decreasing abandonment and allowing them to get through that process. Augmenting or maybe replacing knowledge-based authentication. The challenge with knowledge-based authentication is twofold. Some end users do not have sufficient credit histories to apply through those methods. It could be they're new to the country, or they've had a bankruptcy, or just new to credit in general. And then we find in many cases for credit data, when it is applicable, a lot of the fraudsters have got that data already. So there's some statistics out there that show if all of the answers are correct, it may be the fraudster, because most people don't answer all of them correct because they forget some of those details. So we're able to help augment or replace those processes. The third component of this is the channel. So we support through our products native, mobile web, and a desktop to mobile experience, so that no matter where your end user or your consumer is going through the process, we're able to support them through that digital interaction. And then ultimately, you say yes to more good customers, and you do it easily and quickly without a lot of burden on that process. So now I'm going to go into the demos. These are pre-recorded clips just to make sure we get through them with time being of the essence. They should be loading. All right, so the first one is our iOS demo. This is a native process. Imagine this user is in the context of verifying their ID for new account onboarding. We're going to ask that user first to present the back of their ID document. So here, this is a driver's license. We're asking the user to present it, and as soon as the document is lined up, we're automatically capturing information from the barcode. The majority of U.S. driver's licenses and ID cards have a PDF 417 barcode on the back that has, in most cases, the same information that's encoded in the front. So in that short session, we've captured that ID document back, and we've located the barcode. From there, the experience would flip right to the front. And the front is using our patented MySnap technology. MySnap provides guidance to the user in real time. So we're evaluating the video stream of the device. We're providing messages to that user to get closer or to align the ID. And within that short session, we're both capturing the document by identifying that it has four corners, sharpness and brightness are a proper condition, but we're also doing our security feature scanning to validate the authenticity of that document. From there, the end result of that capture is ID verified. So typically you wouldn't provide this sort of messaging back to end users. What would happen is they would go on to the next step in their workflow, but you can see the breadth of content that we've pulled from that document. That could be used for purposes of pre-filling application forms or for downstream checks against other systems. So that's the ID verification, and that's the happy path. So they got the barcode scanned and the front scanned, and they passed. Now I'm going to show a scenario where something slightly changes on the document. So we're still going to have a scan of the back first, so we'll do that. And now we're going to flip to the front, but here we're going to change the document. So we put in a different face there. We're able to provide feedback to the user. Ultimately, they're able to capture the document because we can align the corners and there's no glare, sharpness and brightness are good, but you'll notice that we've got a mismatch here. So we were able to extract information from that document, but it flagged in our mobile SDK a partial security feature match. And that was a basic use case. We obstructed the face, but typically when a fraudster is going to make an attempt to impersonate or in some cases create a new synthetic identity, they're going to modify a document and they're going to change parts of that document, and that would trip up this security feature detection and that would flag it. Again, you may not provide this message back to an end user, but what it will do is allow you to move that user to the next step in the workflow based on that result. Switching gears, I'd like to show you now our mobile web SDK. So what you've just seen is our native product that allows for security feature scanning and real-time video analysis in a native app. Here we're doing a browser-based capture. So in the browser, the main difference is we don't have the same level of access to the hardware on the camera, so we're limited in our evaluation. What I want to point out is the difference is the capture. So the end user has to manually take the picture, but what we've done as an innovation area is we have applied a computer vision algorithm in the browser to evaluate the quality of that image to make sure that it's good for processing. So here we're taking a picture. As soon as the use photo is pressed, we're doing that computer vision analysis, and then we are processing the transaction. So here we've extracted that information, and then ultimately we can provide verification details. Our mobile web product has been pretty widely used as many of the onboarding activities occur typically in a browser. So most customers in a banking environment don't start with downloading the app. They start with a mobile web experience, so it becomes an important channel for usage. So that's the gist of the product demos. From here, we can pass it back to Mike. We have time to do questions and answers, and so I'll hand it back to you, Mike.
Excellent. Excellent. Thank you, Steve. And yes, as promised, we've got about 15 minutes here for some questions. And I see a lot of good questions coming in here, so let me go ahead and let's just jump right into it. All right. First question, let me ask Julie, does document authentication fulfill the BSA KYC requirements?
So it can help with them. You know, obviously the BSA KYC requirements they're very broad, so it's a lot more than just identity verification or even document authentication. It also involves risk assessment and other things. This can certainly be one part of a KYC program in conjunction with the typical CDD risk assessment that you have to do, the ongoing EDD monitoring, as well as the verification of the identity elements in and of themselves. But I do see a number of AML groups involved in the business decision to bring this technology on board.
Excellent. Excellent. Thank you. All right. Let's see. We got another question for Julie. What types of businesses have you seen deploy this technology?
I've seen a variety of different types of businesses. I've seen some banks. I think the larger banks are moving a little bit faster than some of the regional banks. I've seen some smaller banks actually also deploying this, community banks and credit unions. The business case process, the vendor risk management process tends to slow these things down at banks. I've seen a number of money remitters using this. In some cases more from a customer experience perspective versus just a pure risk management perspective, so making it easier for customers who are transacting in the mobile environment to input their data and get through the KYC process in a seamless manner. I've seen some alternative lenders using it, and also a number of payments firms. So doing CNP type of payment processing and using that as one step of their identity verification. So kind of runs the gamut.
Interesting. Thank you. Okay. Now we got one for Steve here. Does Mitek offer verification of passports, U.S. and foreign, or is it unique to U.S. driver's licenses?
Great question. No, it's not specific just to U.S. documents. We actually have coverage for many countries in the world, and that includes passports for those countries. And typically, it'll be driver's licenses, or if there's a country-sponsored ID card. In some cases, countries have like a voter registration card that becomes the document of choice for most ID verifications. So we have a pretty wide range of support.
Great. Thank you. All right here. And another one for Steve. Do you use facial recognition to match the face of the person to the identity that has just been authenticated?
It's actually a really good question, and we didn't show it in the demo today, but yes, we do have technology around that particular use case, and it actually comes up a lot when a follow-on question that I see in here is that how do we know that the individual presenting that ID is them? And so we have a suite around that, a suite of products that include both facial capture, being able to assist the user in getting a good front-facing picture and also do liveness checks against it, and then the ability to compare the extracted face to the selfie. So we do have that. We actually have for facial comparison, we have an automated process that we're moving towards releasing to GA. One interesting thing I see about that capability is it's been, for our European customers, a standard as part of the ID verification, and we've been offering manual and expert services around face comparison. For the United States customers, it hasn't been as big of a question or a need, but we're seeing more and more usage of the face and more demand for an automated comparison of that face in the U.S. So we anticipate going into this next year that being a big part of the mobile verification workflow.
Gotcha. Okay. All right here. Thanks for everyone in the audience. Thanks for your questions. I see lots of stuff coming in, so I appreciate all that activity here. All right. Steve, what are some of the common fraud techniques that you see?
Sure, that's a good one also. A lot of the times, fraudsters are forging documents, so they're changing things within original documents. An example might be changing a name or a date of birth, or in the demo, we showed a face being swapped out. Now, it's not always as blatant as a sticky face put on top of a face. They get a bit surgical, and they may do that with Photoshop, but it's usually modifications We do still see, oddly enough, an area we call fantasy documents, where they're clearly not an identity document of, let's say, the state of California. It's not one that's ever been issued, and we catch those quite quickly. But people still try. They try to confuse the system and trick it. So it's a mix of modifications and just blatant fantasy documents.
Great. Thanks, Steve. And take a look here. Okay. Is government-issued ID a required document as part of KYC?
I can take the first stab at that. So it's, to some extent, it's going to depend on your jurisdiction. I'll assume that this is a question for the U.S. market. In the U.S., under USA Patriot Act, you have to do either documentary authentication or documentary verification or non-documentary. If it's documentary verification, you do have to have some form of government-issued ID that you are verifying. If it's non-documentary, meaning you're collecting the information and verifying against third-party databases, then you don't have to have a physical copy of a government-issued ID, but you have to be performing physical verification of those data elements.
Excellent. Thank you, Julie. All right, here. Let's see. A couple of good questions coming in. What online account opening, mobile account opening solutions does Mitek currently integrate their mobile verify solutions with?
Typically, the integration of our technology goes the opposite direction. So a provider would take our technology and integrate it into their product. The most prominent one, and we've actually done a webinar with them, is Avoca. And so they've taken our mobile SDK and built that into their online account opening platform. We may have a few others in the works. That would be a good follow-on question to reach out to us directly, and we could discuss who your primary technology service provider is for that and if we have an ongoing relationship with them.
Great. Thank you, Steve. Okay, here. Next question. Steve, does Mitek offer ID verification that is not mobile-based?
Yes. So the demos you saw today showcased our mobile SDK. That is our preferred method for acquisition of IDs because of the quality of the camera and the ability for us to run video streams to analyze. But we do support web service call-based ID validation. So if those IDs or other documents are captured through other means, perhaps it's not through a mobile device, those can be sent to Mitek and we can apply our server-based algorithms to them and provide results back. So it's not limited just to the mobile acquisition.
Excellent. Excellent. Thank you, Steve. And let's see here. I think that brings us to, let me see here. Okay, here's another question. For Julie, is funding requirements the key element holding banks back from offering clients the ability to open DDA accounts wholly online, or is there a fraud component to this as well? That is, a concern over using non-monetary verification?
No, I think that as you look at the pace with which applications are migrating from branch to digital for DDA versus credit card, the funding requirement actually is more holding consumers back. So we've done a couple of different bodies of consumer research to understand how consumers are opening their accounts. And one of the key findings we had in one of our last pieces of research was that of the consumers that are opening their accounts in the branch, fully 1/3 of them started their application in digital channels and got frustrated or got stuck and had to go to a branch. And a lot of times it was they had a question or they had a challenge around how to get the funding done. And so there's a strong desire on the part of many banks to move more and more of the onboarding into the digital channels. It's just not quite as seamless. It's not quite as straightforward of a process in the DDA environment as it is in credit card where you don't have that funding. need. And so we see consumers getting tripped up and ending up in the branch, or the more distressing part of that for many banks I talk to is that how many of those consumers got frustrated and just didn't wind up in the branch and went somewhere else. So still lots of opportunity for process improvements in that digital onboarding space.
Excellent. Excellent. Thank you, Julie. All right, here, another question for Steve. Does the user's phone need to be on Wi-Fi for the technology to work?
The user doesn't need to be on Wi-Fi, but they do need internet connectivity. So that could be through a cellular connection. Typically, our workflow is in the context of account opening. So they would already be in a browser navigating and providing information. Or in the context of native applications, there will be some communication back and forth with our customers' servers and platforms. Some of our technology can run in the absence of connectivity. So certainly as MySnap is evaluating the identity document, it's not streaming or sending any information to a server. But when the ID image is captured, and for that to be fully processed, it does need to be transmitted back to our cloud platform or to the customer's infrastructure.
Great, great, thank you. Okay, let's see, a couple great questions here. Oh, okay, Steve, so you are not comparing the photo against a known DB, but instead only comparing against known valid constructive details of the specific document. Is that correct?
Right. So we're not extracting the photo of the person from the driver's license and doing any queries against databases or the internet. We are just taking that face, and if there's a facial comparison component of that, we can compare it to a selfie. But otherwise, we're evaluating the construct of that document to make sure, in the case of the security features, that they're not broken and that we can fully capture it. We've had questions about facial lookups. I know there are some countries that have facial databases of known criminals or fraudsters that can be bounced against that, but that's not something that Mitek is doing right now.
Understood. Understood. Okay. Are cameras on tablets generally adequate for your mobile verification?
It depends on the generation of tablet. We've got a lot of experience with this in the mobile deposit side of the business, and some of the older versions of the iPad or the various Android devices, they've got fixed focal length cameras. Many of the older ones don't have front-facing cameras. Some of them don't have the ability to capture a high enough resolution. So we recommend to most of our customers that they implement this in the smartphones. Those tend to be updated more frequently. Many end users don't upgrade their tablets as often as they do their phone, unless it's a branch-assisted scenario. In a branch-assisted scenario, the bank may buy a specific version of a tablet like an iPad, and then they can specify the hardware, which makes it easy to certify against that device. So most of the newer iPads, like the iPad Airs, work quite well. It's just the old generation of devices makes it a little bit harder to get the quality that we need.
Great, thank you. Okay, Steve, another question for you. Will we expect to see more ID verification as part of multi-factor authentication, even for something as simple as a forgotten password?
What we're seeing is really dependent on the use case. So something as simple as a forgotten password may not make sense for an account that's got $20 in it, but if it is an account that's got millions of dollars in it for, let's say, a wealth management app, there may be that additional deployment of those additional factors. One of the friction points around these experiences include the account takeovers, but it can also include breakdowns and other technologies being used. For example, the one-time password approach with text messages, there's been proven ways to get around that. So I think the core of what we'll see in the next year is more around the initial identity proofing step, and then going further into the future, we'll see more authentication use cases where after the user has done something, if it's suspicious, then there may be a number of techniques that are presented, and that might be in a random way. So in one case, it might be presenting a driver's license. In the next case, it might be confirming a biometric. But we definitely see that as long as the ID documents are relevant and are used in the broader Know Your Customer process, that using those in other scenarios will be common.
Okay, perfect. And I think that is an excellent note to end on. We are right at the top of the hour, and we do love to bring our programs in on time, respecting everyone's very busy days. But it's been a great hour of discussion. Always great to have sort of video clips as aids here, and lots of great questions from the audience. I think there might have been some questions we didn't get to in the time we had, but as I said, we will be following up with everyone, so please thank you for putting those questions in there. And let me, again, thank Steve and Julie both for the time together we've had, and everyone in the audience. Thank you for being here, and please keep an eye out in your email. We will be sending you a link to the recording of today's event, as well as the slides themselves in a PDF form. So that will be coming your way, and you can then relive this moment in time in the future. So we encourage you to do that. And with that, I'll wrap it up. Wish everyone a wonderful rest of the day, and I hope you'll join us again here very soon. Thanks so much, everyone.